It's a special treat for me today to introduce our commencement speaker. We've been trying to get Mr. Brock to come here for years. And I had prepared some notes of how to introduce him, and it sounds more like fiction, like an adventure book or fiction, but he asked me not to say anything. Instead, let me say two things. Number one, he's the founder of the non-profit organization Remote Area Medical, and I think he will talk more about it. And I also found a quote about Stan that said the following: "He has no money, no income, and no bank account. He spends 365 days a year at the charity events, sleeping on a small rolled-up mat on the floor and living on a diet made up entirely of porridge and fresh fruit." Stan, please.
Thank you very much for inviting me here today. A great honor. I bring no academic distinction to this august body, being myself a high school dropout. But you folks have done the right thing, and I would like to first of all recognize the many volunteers from this university dental school that have been remote area medical volunteers. And Dr. Kevin D'Angelo, I know is here somewhere. And his son Bill is one of the graduates today, and I think Bill was with us in 2001. And Dr. Gamacorda, who very nicely was with us yesterday evening, who we've seen 6 or 7 or 8 times down there on these missions. Thank you very much, Dr. Gamacorda. And I think that Joe DeMarco, who has flown with his airplane at his own expense, many volunteers down there, is probably somewhere in the house, and thank you very much, Joe. You know, and the dean said, you can talk as long as you like, but we're all leaving in 15 minutes. So I'll be brief, but you know, life is a series of opportunities, and the trick is to select the right opportunity and go for it. And so you find student dentists, now dentists, who are going out into the world after today have really made the right choice. The need for dentistry is just enormous everywhere we go. Hundreds and hundreds of thousands of patients that we've seen attest to that, not only overseas, but of course here in this country. And when I was a youngster, I had an opportunity and got on a boat in the port of Southampton, England, and sailed to a place called British Guiana. And on the way there, I heard about this wild country on the northern border of Brazil, where lived the Wapishana Indians and all kinds of interesting wild animals. And so, not having any academic qualifications to fall back on, having left school too early, I decided that perhaps that was the place for me. And so shortly after arriving at the port of Georgetown, I found my way to the Brazilian frontier, hundreds of miles to the south, and found that it was an area inhabited by, some 50,000 wild longhorn cattle that had been left there by the Spanish conquistadors many hundreds of years earlier, and several thousands of horses, and all the cowboys were Indians. And they were barefoot cowboys. And so I became a cowboy, or as a vaquero, as they call them there. And one of the first things that they did to me in this initiation period was that I was assigned a horse called Kang. Now, Kang was a Wapishana word that meant the devil. Kang had already killed 2 other cowboys. And it wasn't many months ago that I actually had breakfast with the 6th man to walk on the moon, astronaut Ed Mitchell, in Tucson, Arizona. And Ed Mitchell asked me, he said, "Why did you start remote area medical?" And I said, "Well, that goes back, Ed, way, way back into the last century, when I was a young cowboy on the border of Brazil, and I was assigned this horse called Kang. And we lassoed Kang in the corral and tied him up to a tree and blindfolded him. And I climbed on his back very apprehensively, pulled off the blindfold, and Kang went bucking across the savannah and had a head-on collision with the side of a corral. And I was lying underneath Kang, very badly injured, and the Wapishana cowboys came running over, and they pulled me out from underneath Kang, and one of them said, "Well, the nearest doctor," and I might add dentist, "the nearest doctor is 26 days on foot from here." And when astronaut Ed Mitchell, the 6th man to walk on the moon, heard me say that, he said, "Wow." He said, "I was on the moon, and I was only 3 days from the nearest doctor." But you know what? Those people who live in those places, like the upper Amazon, where I lived for so many years, and indeed millions of people here in the United States might as well be on the moon for the opportunity that they have to see a doctor, and particularly a dentist. And so really it was that wild horse Kang that gave me that inspiration as I lay there very badly injured, that maybe it was time to try and bring those doctors and dentists and nurses just a little bit closer than 26 days on foot. Well, the years went by, and somebody then suggested, "Well, why don't you learn to fly? You know, you can cut this 26-day on foot journey down to a matter of a few hours." Well, I'd never been any higher off the ground than the back of a horse. But we set about making our first airstrip there in that wild place, and we made it about 700 or 800 feet long, and we cut down some trees, and I thought it looked okay, and got on my horse and rode for 9 days to the edge of the rainforest, and then the other 20 days on foot from there, and started taking flying lessons. And 2 weeks later, a somewhat misguided aviation official gave me a license. And I loaded up a drum of fuel in the back of the airplane, and I flew a few hundred miles following the Essequibo River. I'd been down it before in a canoe, and found where the Rupununi River intersected, and made a right turn and came out over the savannas and got down low. So it looked like I was on horseback, but everything was going by so much faster. And finally found the place where we'd made the airstrip, and I circled the airstrip, and there were the Wapishanas down there with their hand tools, all looking up at the airplane with fascination, and I came in for a landing. Well, it wasn't one of my best. And I got down on the ground, and I came on the brakes a little too heavily, and the airplane somersaulted over on its back in a pile of wreckage. And as I crawled out from the wreckage, the Wapishana Indians came over, and they were all full of smiles because they thought this was the normal way of landing. Well, we lengthened the airstrip, we took off the propeller, we hammered it straight on a rock, and eventually I flew the airplane back to Georgetown for a proper repair. And you know, it was very helpful, that airplane, because it enabled us to bring medicines and basic medical supplies to that remote area of the upper Amazon. Dentistry was unheard of, except the brutal methods that we had to use to deal with people with severe dental pain. And I won't go into that process, but you can just imagine living in a place where there was no dentist, and no dentist had ever been there before either. And so after I got the airplane, I started harassing a gentleman in Georgetown with the government. His name was Major C.J. Betancourt Gomes, E.M. retired. And I would call him up on the radio, on the airplane radio, and say, Major Betancourt Gomes, we've really got to do something about this lack of health care amongst the Wapishana Indians. And there's no dentist here. And people are dying of infections from bad teeth. And women in labor are dying with infections from bad teeth. And this plea went on for, several more years. And then finally, I got a call from the aide-de-camp to Major Betancourt Gomes saying, Major Betancourt Gomes will be arriving on Saturday afternoon. Make sure the airstrip is okay. He is bringing with him the Secretary of Health from Whitehall in London. And they should arrive there about in time for tea. I said, well, I hope they're bringing the tea. We can at least provide the boiling water. And sure enough, there about 4 o'clock, here came the little government airplane landing on a much improved airstrip. And Major C.J. Betancourt Gomes got out with the Secretary of State for Health all the way from Whitehall in London, very nattily dressed in the British Army, bush jacket and long leather boots up to here, something to do with snakes, I think. We were all, of course, barefoot cowboys. And so we had tea, and Major Betancourt Gomes said, now, Brock, he said, tomorrow morning, it's Sunday morning, by the way, Brock, isn't there a Roman Catholic priest in this area? And I said, yes, Father McKenna. I see him occasionally, every year or so. He walks from one village to the other. He said, well, Brock, send out some runners and see if you can get Father McKenna here so that Sir Archibald Fenton Sedgwick, the Secretary of State for Health, we can have a little church service here tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. I said, well, I'll certainly send out some runners to look for Father McKenna, but what will we do if we can't find Father McKenna? And Major Betancourt Gomes said, well, then we'll have gin and tonics. And, well, we couldn't find Father McKenna. And so they had their gin and tonics. And then Major Betancourt Gomes said, now, Brock, get one of your better horses, and I want you to take Sir Archibald Fenton Sedgwick to the nearby Indian village, which was several miles away, and so he can see what the problem is with the lack of dental care and medical care in general. So I said, well, I don't think it's a very good idea. You know, our horses are not very well behaved. Let me take him out there in the Jesus Christ cart. And let me explain what the Jesus Christ cart was. It was actually a replica of that model that Jesus Christ used to use on the interstate in Nazareth. We took a large rainforest tree and we cut it down, and then we made two segments of solid wooden wheels, joined them together with an axle, and put some boards across the top, and then we hitched 4 or 6 tame oxen, yoked in order to pull it. It was a very useful vehicle because as we had no doctor and no dentist, unfortunately, people were coming to me, totally uneducated person, high school dropout, for their medical care. And one of the most frightening things that I was confronted with periodically were those women in labor that were having some problem with the baby, and they'd sent somebody in to say, can you come and get Mrs. Wapishana so-and-so because she's having difficulty with her pregnancy. And I would always send the Jesus Christ cart, you see, because then they would load up Mrs. Wapishana in the cart and then head it my way, which is 5 or 6 miles, with the bullocks pulling the cart, and it was sort of bouncing gently across the savannah. And almost invariably, by the time it got to my little mud hut, there was an extra passenger on the cart, and I didn't have to deal with the medical problem. Well, Major Betancourt Gomes said, no, Brock, he said, Sir Archibald Fenton Sedgwick is a very experienced horseman, Indian Army, 7th Hussars. Just get your best horse and take him out to the village. So I sent the cowboys to bring our best horse. Our best horse was a horse called Rosie. Now, Rosie was a male horse, but we'd done something to Rosie earlier on in his career. And it was a very good horse, and we had it saddled up with the rudimentary saddle that we all made ourselves. And so I'm holding on to the business end of Rosie, and Sir Archibald Fenton Sedgwick, he was a pipe smoker, by the way, and he had 2 pipes, one in his pocket and the other in his mouth or in his hand, and he was never quite sure which one he was going to use. And he came up to Rosie and addressed Rosie in cavalry officer fashion. And you see, Rosie wasn't used to that. All the cowboys who were Indians would sort of approach the horse from whatever side it happened to be standing on, and just walk up to the horse and jump on and ride off. And so this business of this large gentleman with a pipe about to mount up, it was a little bit disconcerting for the animal, and Rosie started to back up. And I'm backing up with Rosie, and Sir Archibald Fenton Sedgwick is hopping on one leg with one in the stirrup, and he gets the other leg halfway over, and Rosie's had enough, and Rosie rears up on her hind legs and falls over backwards on Sir Archibald. And Major Betancourt Gomes over here says, Brock, my God, what have you done? And I call out to the Wapishana cowboys, Kadimen Sutan Parangre Kawara warrant it, which in English means, get the white man out from underneath the horse. Well, we got Sir Archibald on his feet and dusted him off and found his pipes. And Sir Archibald said, Brock, he said, I would like to do that again, but do you have another horse without reverse gear? Well, let it be said that nothing really happened that year about bringing real dentists and real doctors to the Wapishanas. And several years later, I was brought here to the United States, and now that was a shock. If you can imagine, after living many, many years, growing up with the Wapishana Indians, and suddenly being brought up to this country, this fine, great country, to Chicago, in a matter of a day or two, by jet plane. And after I'd been in Chicago a few weeks, I actually gave 50 cents to the Black Panthers because I thought it was to help preserve an endangered species. And then I had an opportunity to travel all across the United States, and I was surprised to find that there were Wapishanas everywhere, people who simply didn't have access to the system. And so, from that inspiration that wild horse Kang gave me, those many, many years before, was actually the inspiration to form Remote Area Medical. And 64% of everything we do is here in this country. And I'm very proud of the fact that last year, 29 of you folks, along with Dr. Gamacorda and Dr. Angelo, were at many of our clinics. And so as you go out into the world today, I hope that you'll stay in touch with us and our head dentist here, Dr. John Osborne, who's been with us many, many years. And I hope that we'll have an opportunity to see you many, many times. And so thank you for the honor of inviting me here today. And good luck to all of you. And come see us again soon. Thank you.